All right, on this week's episode, we've got former Marine Steve Robb with us. Going to talk about his transition out of the service and what he's done in the commercial real estate world. So stay tuned. All right, well, Steve, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for participating with us as well. I think it's kind of interesting that I figured being in San Antonio, I would have nothing but Air Force folks in, and surprisingly, it's been Marine over and over and over again, which was not what I expected. I've learned a few things where I expected to be enlisted. Air Force is who I expected all my interviewees, and it's been more Marines and more officers. So it's been a unique journey on this one. So can you share with us what you did while you were in service?
Be happy to. Graduated, I'll give you my background first, and
Sure.
thanks again for the pleasure and the privilege of being able to meet with you and talk with vets here in San Antonio or wherever they happen to be. I graduated from University of Houston, December 1973. So it just tells you how old I am, really old. Went to basic school in January 74 and was stationed in Okinawa. At that time, the Marines had already exited Vietnam, but briefly. In May 75, Saigon fell, which was extremely dramatic and traumatic for everyone that was involved. Everybody in the service was deployed that direction, and there was a lot of exfil of both Americans and Vietnamese out. It's a terrible situation. After 18 months in Okinawa, I moved to Parris Island, South Carolina for 4 years in recruit training. Then 3 years at Camp Lejeune as a company commander and a logistics officer. Then last 2 years that I was in the service, I was transferred here to San Antonio. I was kind of due for a staff job, and I was at the Security Hill at the Joint Electronic Warfare Center. I'm not sure it's still around, but this was a very interesting top secret type of classification we had. We weren't supposed to tell anybody where we worked or what we did in case there was a Russian agent in the next booth at Jim's overhearing us.
Right.
So I decided to get out of the Marine Corps, and probably the first question is, why would you leave at 10 years in? The reasons were that I had done all what I considered the fun things in the Marine Corps. I'd been a platoon commander, executive officer, S3 Alpha, series commander, company commander, logistics officer, and then at Joint Electronic Warfare Center, which was a fascinating transition for me. But I knew that looking ahead, I probably have mostly desk jobs, mostly staff positions, and would not have an opportunity for command, which was what I really enjoyed. And I'd had an opportunity to do a lot of traveling while I was in the service. So I decided that now that I was in San Antonio, I spent a couple years here, it was time for me to transition from the military to civilian life and to get into business. So it was very much a conscious decision, a difficult decision, because particularly in the Marine Corps, and maybe at that time, maybe it's different now, you live, eat, sleep, and drink Marine Corps. Sure. They don't station Marines in large cities if they don't have to. They put us off in the hinterland, whether it's Camp Hansen in Okinawa or Camp Lejeune in North Carolina, wherever we are. So moving to an urban city like San Antonio in itself was a bit of a transition, but it helped me move from the military life to civilian life, which is a big transition in itself, a different way of looking at other people. As they said, sir, you got to be careful. There's no one in charge out there. My first sergeant said that. Going into business. But interesting, you noted that you've interviewed a number of Marines. Maybe it's because of our aggressive nature, that you said in the best sense of the word possible, that going into, in my case, commercial real estate requires a bit of aggressiveness.
Sure.
It ain't no desk job. So I interviewed a number of different places. I decided over the last year I was so in the Marines to talk to everybody I could possibly talk to in the commercial world, commercial real estate, in mortgage banking and finance and everything else, just to kind of get an idea of what was the possibilities. What would it look like? What would my new life look like?
So did you already know you didn't want to sell houses and you were already looking at commercial right away, or?
Yes, that would be the case. my personality was not one that was going to blend real well, I thought, with selling homes. I like the investment side very well, and I I was actually looking to invest in real estate while I was in San Antonio, and it was calling off signs just to see what the possibilities were. So I came across Investment Realty Company, interviewed with them. They were looking for someone, like me, younger generation, because the older generation was kind of moving on toward retirement. So I started with them right at the end, actually, whatever number of years would be. Well, damn, it would be 30 years. November 10th, literally, Marine Corps birthday, 1984, we're almost on November the 10th, 2024. So I guess that's a milestone or landmark. First year I was in, and well, I can tell you about my stuff. It would take you hours. I can sit here and ramble on about deals and so forth. But more probably pertinent to your audience is, first of all, I did want to be in commercial real estate. I like the investment side of it, and that's exactly what IRC, Investment Realty Company, was doing. I liked the people that I would be working with because they were the generation older than I was. I felt like I could learn a lot from them.
Sure.
And I knew I needed to have a mentor or mentors in order to really pick up the business. So I guess that would be one of the first things. If I was giving advice, first you need to find something that you're really excited about. Even if it's really difficult, that's fine. If it's really difficult, maybe not too many people are going to go do it.
Fair.
If it's really easy, you're going to have a lot of competition to do it. So find something that you really, really like, that motivates you. And then secondly, try to find somebody who knows how to do it really well, or some people, and associate yourself with them, whether it's literally a cup of coffee or an interview, or actually going to work for someone where they can teach you the ropes. Because if you really only learn a business segment from doing it on a day-to-day basis and watching how other people do it.
Sure.
Literally jumping in the deep end of the pool and learning how to swim. I've learned so much of what I do in commercial real estate. A lot of it has come from just being associated with people I've been doing deals with. I try to go to like brokers' breakfast, join the CCIM organization, ULI now. Those weren't available back then. So anything I could do for education. One of the other things that I did was read every book I could find, whether it was Tom Robbins about selling residential real estate or other sales books. I came to realize that one of the areas I wouldn't actually be doing sales per se, it was more negotiations. So when I was looking for books, whether it was the library, there was no online in 1985, anything that said negotiation in the title I bought and read. And I have a whole library of books that are just about negotiation, because I knew I was finding that's really what I was going to be doing, was being negotiating. So that was helpful. One of the things that in doing the interviewing process before I went with IRC, and I talked to all the commercial real estate people who would open their door to me, and everybody was very generous with the time, and I could always get a 30-minute interview one way or the other. And I'd find out from them what they were doing and so forth, what the market was doing. But one of the very consistent recommendations was get your CCIM, your Certified Commercial Investment Member PIN. And back then, that was a relatively new thing. So I started the business in '85. As soon as I could, I signed up for, I think, our first course, CII 101. They offered actually here in San Antonio, I believe in early 1986, if my fuzzy memory serves me right. Worked through the program and got my PIN in February 1988. And my number's, I think, 3802. So, which is sounds low. Yeah. Tom Brody says this is like 654. So you let everybody know that he was a lower number, but that's okay. So that was a wonderful education in finance, which I did not have from college. It really opened my eyes to how to deal with investment property. That plus working with the folks I was in commercial real estate with, in an investment realty company, timing is one of the other things that is very important. They ask, what are the three most important things in real estate? They are?
Location, location, location?
No, they're
Uh-oh.
not. I'd say it's timing, timing, and timing. Because the timing actually determines when and how a location would be good.
Fair.
I just happened to have a luncheon out at the Barn Door, and they have a picture of the Barn Door back like 1948 or whatever it was, and it was literally a roadhouse with dirt roads to it. San Antonio Airport was way out in the countryside at the time. Of course, everything's filled in around it. So all those places that have become good locations were once really not such good locations, but because of timing became good. And another point is that you have, you make your money when you buy. And it's better to buy something that's less expensive than something that's real expensive. Seems to be counterintuitive, or intuitive, but you have to understand where the value is. And one of the other things is you want to buy in the path of growth. Well, the path of growth is basically putting a clock on demographic shifts. So demographic growth is all about timing, because somebody's going to buy 100 acres out there and turn them to 400 home lots for people, and there's going to be retail and so forth that go on around it. So I would say the three most important things in real estate, particularly commercial real estate, is timing, timing, and timing, because that determines what a location is good or not.
Okay, that's fair.
In regards to timing, my timing was either really good or really bad. 1985 was a good year for me. I had a couple really good sized deals. The fellow who was running our company at the end of the year said, "Steve, you had a really great year. Don't expect it to always be like that." And okay, took that with a grain of salt. Well, 1986, 85 the market was peaking, and 86 it turned down hard. In January 86, oil went to $10 a barrel. The savings and loan crisis began in full, and they took away the tax breaks that were in the IRS code that had spawned the huge real estate boom in the 1970s and the early 80s. If someone wants to go back, if you look, the amount of real estate that was built in the early 80s was vastly beyond what we could absorb, because the savings and loans were pouring a lot of money into it,
Right.
and they all went broke. So we had 7 years of bad times we call the RTC times, or the savings and loan crisis. Getting through that time was very difficult. I was very glad I was with the company I was with, because they kept me going through that period of time. So one of the things I would recommend to someone, as I said earlier, is try to find your niche, find that area that you can really focus on, that you're really excited about, and really work at it. And you brought me in here to talk about commercial real estate. Okay, and an overview of commercial real estate is that there are the 5 basic sectors of real estate. There's office, retail, industrial, apartments, and land. And that segmentation goes back many, many decades. And many companies break their brokerage up into those segments. And we did, when we had our brokerage company, we focused people in those particular areas. You had to learn a particular area. So my point there would be, if you're going to be very successful, you have to know one thing really, really, really well, one area. And you try to pick one that you really like, that you think is going to have a lot of potential, and that you're willing to go at the competition very good, very heavily.
So I think that's one of the things that a lot of folks early on don't get. I want to get into real estate. My license is good for everything. Even when I started off, I was like, something shiny, I'm going to go do it.
Yes.
And it wasn't until I finally got hired someplace that made me focus in medical office.
Yeah.
And then I spent a good
Yes.
decade in medical office and
Yes.
realized that I hated doctors. It came to that
Everybody
determination. And I was like,
You're not unique.
I probably need to shift, but it was that medical office
Yes.
that was that core
Yeah.
that built that ability, which I think too many times, especially coming to commercial,
Yes.
you could chase everything.
Well, you're exactly right. And the saddest day of my year is when I have to go through my files and pull out all the deals that I'm no longer going to be working on, that don't have a chance. And I have to look at all the time and effort and really good work that I put in on something, and for reasons,
Yeah,
a
just didn't get
hundred
paid.
reasons, it just didn't make. And you have to be able to work through that because I think it's that way in any business. You always have a lot of opportunities, but the 80-20 rule that I try to teach our interns. What's the 80-20 rule? 80% of your income comes from 20% of your business. And you put in 80% of your work to get 20% of your return. So it's called the Pareto principle. You can look that up on Google search. It's important to pick those areas and then pick an area that you think you can specialize in, and then find somebody who's going to help you learn that. Because generally speaking, there are no books out there. There are books on generalities, like I mentioned, negotiation. But in our company, as an example, we had an apartment group. And good old David Lawhorn headed up our apartment group. He was just fabulous at that. You could put your finger on a map of San Antonio, and he could tell you what apartment complex you just put your finger on, how many units it is, who owns it now, who in the last 2 or 3 owners, and why it's a good deal or not. He knew everything, but he knew his area very, very, very well. But apartments, just in apartments, and I mentioned the other 5, every one of those sectors has a lot of different varieties. But apartments, you could work on new construction. You could go out and want to build apartments. You're going to need a lot of money to do that, or you associate yourself with a great firm that has a lot of money that can go out and build new apartments. Or you can do fix and flips on 50 to 100 units. And you better know you're contracting real well, or know somebody who does, and you're going to have a good deal of money for that. You could do smaller duplexes and fourplexes, and they don't build many of those, and we're building more of them now, so you have to go out and find them. So one area that I think would, if somebody had the time, effort, and the operating capital behind them, go after apartment sites. Not many people do that as a specialty, but there's certain ways I would do that if I was still in the business. So there's 5 or 6 ideas just on apartments. You can break it down.
Sure.
Same with retail. You can go from malls down to corner convenience stores to triple net leases that are sold globally and nationally. There's all kinds of areas to get into. And so somebody's asking me, how in the world do I get to understand that? You just have to start at the top and you bore your way down. Think of it as in the Marine Corps, we have what we call specialty, MOS. My MOS was 0302, infantry officer. Well, I did a lot of different specialty things as an infantry officer. I mean, I was a platoon commander, but I also learned how to be an executive officer, learned how to be a company commander. Then I got transferred to Paris Island, where I learned how to all about recruit training, which is a whole different thing. Ran receiving barracks for a while, which is a different thing. Then I moved here to San Antonio and went into electronic warfare, which I didn't have much experience with, but they sent me to schools to learn about it, and I helped write doctrine for the Marine Corps to integrate with the other services called Command, Control, Communications, Countermeasures. But I was able to draw on all my background. So again, to your audience or this audience, what I know from the military transition into civilian life? It's a question we all have to ask and answer. First of all, you learn how to read a map real well. That's important. 2, you probably learn very good organizational skills because Marine Corps or Army or Air Force, Navy, they all have very good organizations, and you learn how to work within a large organization. That's something you'd ever want to do for your whole life, but I would say anybody in your 20s, work for a big organization just so you know how they run. So when you start your own organization, your own business, your own brokerage, or whatever you're going to do, you understand how the pieces and the parts fit together with everybody has their own particular niche and how to build a team. And then you also learn how to motivate a team. I remember when I was a second lieutenant, we were having this competition, and I had a fire team out there that I was helping to go through. And the topic came up. I don't remember the conversation, but I think I said a company commander was counsel me a little bit on some things. And I said, well, I'm not a cheerleader. I don't want to be a cheerleader. And it was just a flip comment. He says, no, that's exactly what you need to be. You need to be a cheerleader. And it put a whole different perspective for me on what I was doing. Now, you're not going to be an actual cheerleader, but you have to give inspiration and enthusiasm and excitement, and they're your team. You've got to bring them together as a team, just as anybody, really a coach would, to get their team motivated. Yeah. So you have to do that in commercial real estate. Even if your team you're just an individual broker, but your team is the broker on the other side of the deal. It's the lender, it's the title company, a surveyor, the civil engineer. A lot of people go together to make a deal work. And so you have to bring that team of people together, and you have to realize the broker is the quarterback or the coach, however you want to look at it. But there's always there's an inherent friction between buyer and seller because they have different motives as far as one wants more money, one wants less money, but they both have a common interest in getting the deal closed. And so you have to work through both of those, the conflict, but on the one hand, but the team effort on the other, to bring everybody together and get them over the goal line to finish the deal.
Yeah. Now you talk about interns for a little bit on that one. The complaint I think I've heard, being in the commercial side of the business as well, is that I can't get hired, I can't do this. So on somebody who's transitioning out of the service and they want to go into commercial, if you go to the residential firms, they'll hire you. If you got a pulse and you got a license,
right,
99% of them will hire you. In the commercial side, that's not the case. So how, if I'm transitioning out, how do I land that first job in commercial real estate?
It's a great question, and it doesn't have an easy answer because you already articulated the issue. One path, and I don't recommend it for everybody, one path would be go ahead and join the residential agency, okay, and use that as your internship. And find somebody who knows what they're doing, because what you do, you learn how to do sales, you learn how to organize yourself as a real estate agent, you learn how to do contracts, you learn how to close deals with a title company. So you're learning basic skills. Consider it your boot camp or your officer candidate school. And you're going to move on. You don't want to be in officer candidate school or boot camp forever, but you learn those skills. So nothing wrong with that.
Sure.
But then some of the, as you well know, some of the residential agencies have commercial sides to them. That might be one way to go. But your question was more hardcore. How do you actually get in with a commercial brokerage? It's harder to do these days because I don't think there are many brokerages. I've not gone out and counted them. When I got into business, there were a lot of people, and then 3 years later, the community shrunk by at least half. And the other half was surviving by being asset managers for the Resolution Trust Corporation because it paid a salary, because no deals were getting done at all other than sales of foreclosures. There were no straight up deals at all. There wasn't anybody to finance them. But there may be some brokerages out there. I would probably go to the larger houses, who I will not mention on this phone because I'm not going to give them any unpaid publicity, but you know who you are. Go talk with them because they have a larger shop. They may have somebody in there who's willing to take you under their wing. In our shop, an investment realty company, going back to our history a little bit, in 2008, my two other partners at that time retired. We'd had some deaths and so forth, but by 2008, I had two other folks, and they retired at the same time, and my wife and I bought them out on a prearranged deal. So in January 2008, we became the owners of Investment Realty Company. Well, again, timing wasn't with us because then you had the great financial crisis for 08 and 09, and 10 was not very much fun either. But what we did was build a brokerage side to our business and a property management side to our business, not just the investment side. And so we would have anywhere from 10 to 15 agents and employees at any given time. A number of folks rolled through for whatever reason. But my wife, Connie, who's our executive vice president, always wanted to do interns during the summer. We would get interns from Texas A&M's Lear School of Business or their MBA program for real estate, MRA, Masters of Real Estate. Yeah, I think that's it.
MSRA.
Yeah, because that program was 18 months, so you had 2 summers. At least one of those summers, or one summer, that summer in your 18 months, you had to have an internship in order to graduate.
Oh, okay.
I think also the urban section of Texas A&M, because we got somebody really, really good from there, also required an internship. So that worked out well for us, but we had folks from UTSA, from UT, one was from Wisconsin, A&M, different places, who interned with us for 3 or 4 months, 2 or 3 months, 4 months during the summer period. And we would pair them with somebody so they could just go out and do the interviews or watch what was going on, do the tours just to understand how commercial real estate was put together. Or we would have them do financial analysis on properties, investment properties, or other things. So that was an internship, and vets, that's certainly one way to go, but it's challenging. There's probably an opportunity then there for someone, maybe yourself, Will, to put together a website or something where people who want to offer internships to vets can, in fact, advertise. We've advertised through UTSA's site, or I'll send out an email blast or something, and then we've had people apply to us that we could not take on because maybe we already had the intern or what space wasn't available for us, but we referred them out or let some of the people know who were available who wanted interns to follow up. So.
Yeah. So why did you get involved? And that's where you and I met, was through UTSA, right? I was still in my undergrad. You were kind of leading the CCIM case competition, which I think you still have quite a bit of involvement with that still, right?
Yeah. That program was put together by a CCIM named John Vogel. Sadly, they about 6 months after the program started, John passed away from cancer. Dr. Tom Thompson from UTSA was the academic side of that. So they paired the academic side and the real world business side. And then I was asked by the CCIM group if I would step in. And I worked with Kim Gaz, who was a co-chair with me for a number of years. But we're, I think, doing our 30th semester. It has been very popular, very well received, even so that I think it has national recognition as a really good program. We improve it a little bit every semester. We get feedback from the mentors. But I think one of the coolest things is when we started out, we were canvassing the CCIM organization for people who would volunteer to be mentors. And then we'd also ask some people or anybody from the finance side and then civil engineers. As we've evolved now, as we, some of the people who had done it for so many semesters, they said, we're going to have to pull out. I just can't do this anymore.
Sure.
Great, love the program, but after 5 years and 10 semesters,
I
got to move
break.
on.
Yeah.
So what Laura Gilliland began to do was to ask alumni of UTSA if they would come back and fill in as like co-mentors. And instead of having one mentor, we'd have 2, even 3 on a team.
Sure.
And that has turned into a wonderful resource because so many of the students, they really enjoyed and appreciated the program, the REFD, Real Estate Finance Development Program. They liked and appreciated what the experience and education they got from that specific course, and they wanted to come back and kind of dedicate or help out with younger folks coming into the business too, and that they could do that. Yeah. And so it's been really, really great to see that almost not all of our mentors, but many of them are alumni of the program, so they understand the ins and outs of it. One gentleman who will remain nameless actually has a PowerPoint he does at our Meet the Mentors, and he takes them through the whole program, which is really pretty cool. but I don't want to blow his cover.
Right.
But it's been great.
Yeah.
It's been great, and it's a self-perpetuating program now.
And I can say, when I got out of the Army, I was going to be a house flipper. Was my whole goal, and I was going to go to college to be the smartest house flipper there ever was. That was my goal.
Okay.
Got in the RFD program, quickly realized, oh my God, real estate is more than just flipping houses or selling houses. I had no idea that commercial was a thing. So what was fascinating to me was that as my class went through, everybody in that class wanted to be a developer. So we go to this capstone class, which is that case competition, and we go through the entire site selection, development, whole process we go through there, and then you present in front of a panel of judges.
Exactly.
And I remember vividly, we picked it was one of Red McComb's sites that Tom Rohde was representing.
Okay.
We sat down and said, let's sit down with Tom and figure out what he knows about the site. Let's figure out if he thinks our plan would work, all that kind of stuff. And as we sat down with him, he's like, this is a great idea. We love it. This is amazing. You guys are on the right track. It's great. Come to the day of the competition. Tom Rohde is a judge. You were like, sweet, we've got this. Tom's already seen it. And Tom's like, here's the stupidest product. I was like, oh my God. And he almost flipped on us. And not negatively. He was pointing out the flaws in the program. He was pointing out all those things that we kind of glossed over, some fair, some, were some of the assumptions we were given.
Yes.
And then I laughed later on that 10 years later, as they're trying to sell the property, it was almost exactly what we had pitched was where he was going back, some 10 years later saying, here's potential sites and what it could be. And of course the uses were different and stuff like that. But what we had kind of developed, I was like, what an amazing opportunity. And at that point, I realized, one, I didn't want to be a developer. That program, you're talking about what product types you want to work in and all that. That absolutely vetted so much of that for me very quickly. And honestly, everybody in the class was like, I don't want to do this. And we kind of all realized what we did and didn't want to do through that process.
But it goes back to, I totally agree with you. There's not enough employment slots in San Antonio to take everybody coming out of that class.
Right.
I know. Hopefully that's not heresy. But what it does is expose you to a side of real estate that you need to know. If you're going to be a broker, you need to know how developments go together. You're going to develop land. Well, here's all the steps it has to go through to put, whether it's houses or high-rise office buildings on it. So again, you don't come out as a full-fledged developer out of that. It's not what it's intended to do. But if you're interested in real estate, it gives you a great overview of the possibilities, both positive and negative. And in life, a lot of times, knowing what you don't want to do is as important as knowing what you do want to do.
Well, and what I'll say was great about that program as well, and any kind of program that puts you in those situations, because we were actually talking to real professionals, getting their opinions, going through that. And I can remember it was your wife who I remember this. She called me as a brand new coming in, called me on a retail site. Hi, this is Will with Ann County Management, blah, blah, blah. She's like, Will, you're a recent graduate from UTSA, right? And I was like, well, yes, ma'am. And I hadn't met your wife in person at this point, but she was there at the competition. She goes, you guys were the ones that won the competition with that thing off of military, right? I was like, well, yes, ma'am. She goes, that was good. I really liked what it was, blah, blah, blah. You guys obviously know what you're doing. But hey, anyways, here's what it was. And at that point, I was like, oh my God, somebody knows who I am.
Yeah.
And and to be fair, Connie is that kind of person.
Yes,
I love the broker that Connie is, because I point my agents to her.
There you go.
She follows up. She remembers. She gets all that. Yeah. But I remember that interaction was very quickly oh my gosh, you introduced us, we started to know, and that's where I realized wow, that's a small community as quickly as it is, which I think is different in commercial versus residential. In San Antonio, there's 15,000 residential agents. That's a real number, right? 15,000.
Sure.
In commercial, across all the product types, maybe there's 800 to 1,000. I don't know.
Oh, I doubt there's that many.
I would say that's probably on the high end, yeah.
But going back to what I was saying when I was first kind of introducing my remarks, is I went out and tried to talk to everybody I possibly could, because I didn't know anything about it. So I drive down the street, take down phone numbers on signs, and just call those people. Hey, can I come meet with you? I'm looking at getting in real estate, blah, blah. And again, everyone was very gracious and spent time with me. I could sit down with them, and they would give me good advice, what to do, what not to do. So that was very, very helpful. But also, as you've just related, it also started building my network. So those were people that then I had their cards I could put in my CRM and call up in the future and relate to a previous conversation. And digressing slightly, but not too much, there's things called CRMs, customer relation management software. And I always advise our interns, get one. And I don't. And if it's if you go to the store and buy something that's you write in, God forbid you should actually write with tabs on it, but get something where you can capture that information of the people you've talked to and met. It is so critical. As an example, I was pitching a real estate deal probably about let's say 1992 or 3. We were putting together an investment partnership to work with someone to develop land to sell developed lots, which is one of our business. And went to a high-end investor, high net worth investor, and he, for various reasons, he couldn't go into that, but he mentioned someone else in the business, a related business, that he thought was doing really interesting stuff. I said, okay. And I put that way. I just made a note. It wasn't even an introduction, but I wrote that down, and I tried to call everybody. So I called that fellow and introduced myself, and because I view my role not as a broker, but also someone looking for business opportunities. And so that's my particular focus or lens on real estate. Where are the business opportunities? And he told me that he was doing private lending and told me all about it. I said, oh, that's nice. But it meant nothing to me.
Sure.
Come 2009, one of the fellows in my office who was focused on selling lots to home builders, which was a thing then, came in my office and said, Steve, there are plenty of lots to sell out there. People want to buy, but there's no money for them to build because all the banks have pulled back in 2009. Well, a little light bulb went off this was 2009, April 2009, to back to 1992 or 94, whatever it was, that conversation I'd had. So I knew that fellow's son. I called him, asked him how his dad was doing. He said, okay, can I get his phone number? Called him in and sat down, and we put together a business at that time, which has now evolved into our private equity fund, IRC Capital Residential, which is what I'm focused on primarily now, doing private debt for new construction home builders.
Okay.
And it's a unique business. It was a thing back in the early 90s, but they kind of wrapped the business up because of age and different kinds of things with people. It wasn't going on. We went back and restarted it with a new kind of business model. But that was because I'd had one conversation with a guy who didn't invest with us, who mentioned somebody else who was in a related but not related business, and I made a phone call and I made a note in my files that I remembered, 20 years later, 30 years later, 20 years later, I guess it was, 25, to give them a call, and started a whole business which is involved into my primary focus, my business now.
See, and what I find interesting with that is, as we wrap up most of these interviews, usually the question we ask is, if you could start over, if you do it all over, what would you do? And I would say, a good chunk of the individuals is, man, I wish I'd have done my systems or my CRM or something along those lines from the very beginning. But yet you're here telling me you've built a business off of keeping a CRM, which
That's exactly.
That's I have the same concern. I wish I'd have learned that. I wish somebody would have trained me better on all that, to where now I hire an admin to help me manage it, because I got in such bad habits to do it. But yet you're a perfect example of you got trained right, you did it the right way, you've kept the records, and then you were able to go back 30 years to a conversation and pull somebody's name. And that's an amazing story, just talking about how systems really work.
And I think I would sum that up as something I learned along the way in real estate. Real estate, and commercial real estate especially, more so, is not about the bricks and sticks. It's about the networking. It's about the people. Because people build buildings.
True.
Buildings don't build themselves. Somebody's got to have the idea. They got to get the equity. They got to get the financing. They've got to get everything on board, and that's what they're trained to do in REFD. And you may not be the developer or the quarterback, but you may be a part of that team. But at least you know from REFD, the UTSA program, how everything goes together. Where do I fit in that team? Or as I said, if you're just brokering a deal, you may want to be the quarterback of that team. But it's all about the people. And the people then have the ideas that you bring, you work together. And then the result is eventually a real estate deal, real estate development, something that happens. Take an old building and make it better. Take an old building and tear it down and put something else in its place. You never know. But it's all about your ingenuity, your creativity, but it's about the people. And always, children, always return your phone calls.
I have to say, that's one of the things that, in my role, working in the commercial side, right, having a commercial division, a part of a residential firm.
Yes.
I get a lot of residential agents that are making that switch into commercial for the first time.
Yes.
And that is always the thing that gets brought up all the time, is that commercial agents don't return phone calls. Why don't they return the phone calls? And some of it's kind of embarrassing. I was like, well, it's just kind of how we do. But
there's somebody who actually put on their card,
we
return phone calls.
I've seen that before too.
And there is a wonderful gentleman, one of the icons of commercial real estate in San Antonio, Mike Birnbaum. Mm-hmm. And I remember decades, literally ago, I sat down and interviewed with him. And one of the things he told me that he absolutely requires, it probably still does, is that you must return every phone call before you leave the office. Mm. Every phone call you got that day, you must return it. Even if you're just leaving a message, these days you can do text message or email or whatever, but you must reach out to that person. Do not leave anybody hanging there. And that's tough these days.
It is. And I can remember the first broker I worked for as well. It was the same thing. He's like, this business is easy. All you have to do is answer your phone. And I was like, whatever. I got to get a degree to do this. I've got to do all this. Can't be that easy. And here I am 15 years later. I'm like, if I just answer my phone, like that's every time the phone rings, that's money. It's potentially money every time the phone rings, which is one of the things I love about the residential agents when they transition to commercial, because in their world, if their lifespan is an hour, if they don't return a phone call within an hour, that deal could be on to somebody else because the competition is so high. So one of the things I've noticed is those residential agents that transition over, they bring that speed and lead. They bring that over.
There you go.
And I mean, I've literally had agents. I have to call somebody back. Sorry, I'll talk to you in a little bit. And that customer is there, and that's where some of them become successful, is because they're out answering the phone.
Well,
experienced folks.
It's just showing that you care about people.
True.
I mean, you care about your own personal reputation. You care about your business, about the company you work for. You care about your client, because if you're calling somebody who has a need. Right. And you need to get back with them. Otherwise, you show them that you're not worth anything to me, basically. Mm-hmm. By not returning the phone call, you're going to ignore them. Well, then they're not going to want to do business with you, because if you haven't displayed a care for them, they figure that's the way you're going to treat me throughout the deal. True. And that's who you are. I mean, every time you open your mouth, you build your brand, one way or the other.
I love it. Yep. So if you were to find yourself leaving the Marine Corps today.
Yes. Okay.
Right?
Okay.
And you knew you're going to get into commercial real estate.
Yeah.
Is there anything you would have done different today versus when you initially did it?
I think the answer is probably no. But obviously, times and situations are vastly different now than they were then. Mm-hmm. But I've tried to relate by answering your questions what I felt was important, and I think I did all the things that I thought were important. But I talked about being a specialist versus a generalist. I am a generalist. Mm-hmm. I mean, I ran a brokerage company where we had an apartment group, commercial group, land, and property management. And my wife and I oversaw all of that. And I was literally involved in every single deal. So I had to know about apartments and office and retail and industrial and all the various types of land. But I enjoy that. So, but I would recommend somebody don't try to be a generalist because, like you related, you're chasing every shiny object that rolls by, and that's a sure ticket to a failure because there's too much that has to go into every single deal to make it work. So the other thing is you want to be recognized for being really good in one area. This is what I guess shared with also with the interns. If you're a specialist and everybody knows you're really, really good at X, then there's kind of an overflow. They said, well, he's really, really good at X, or she's really, really good at X. They're probably pretty good at Y too. Not their specialty, but at least they're really good at something. But if you're not good at anything, your brand is so diluted that somebody walks up to you at a meeting and they're not quite sure who you are, or what you do, or how you fit into the world. So it's about building your brand, and to some extent, that specialization is an important part of that.
So what else on you've mentioned the building the brand a couple
Yes,
times now. What is it that somebody brand new coming in, what is it they can really do to build that brand?
Well, as I said, obviously you need to make the contacts, but you need to recognize when you're making a contact, you want to make a good first impression because it's, like I said, your first impression is always the lasting impression. So it's how you dress, how you greet people. And again, I think most times people coming out of the military kind of have that because
Sure.
you're taught how to present yourself, how to dress and look the part, and how to speak, how to present yourself. So I think those would probably be some of the things. Associating yourself with a good company that already has a brand, so you kind of get a little bit of the shadow or over cover from that particular brand, because then you're under that brand too. It says, well, okay, they've got that stamp of approval. That's a check mark in the right box. So, so I think some of those things would probably be important.
Okay. Well, I appreciate it, Steve. That was all great information.
Oh,
I appreciate
my
you
pleasure.
sharing your story and your experiences with all that. Again, you're coming from a bit of a different boat than many of our guests we've had on here as well. So I absolutely appreciate your time and your service.
My pleasure. I'm glad to do it, and hopefully something I've said will be value to someone else in the future.
Yeah, and we've gotten questions in the past too, where we'll call somebody up and say, "Hey, you got a question? Can you answer that one?" So hopefully you're willing to answer those
Sure.
as well.
Sure, be happy to do that.
So, all right, appreciate it. Thank you so much.